Today, as Father said, we return to ordinary time in our liturgical calendar. You know, since the beginning of Lent, we've been on a special journey through our faith. Lent brings Palm Sunday, then we had Holy Week, then Easter, and that brings the octave, the 8 days of Easter. Then came Divine Mercy Sunday, and then we had the whole Easter season, and then came the Feast of the Ascension. And that brought us to Pentecost. And all of this was followed by the Feast of the Holy Trinity. And last week, the Feast of Corpus Christi. For almost 4 months now, I feel like we've been kind of on a spiritual sugar high, don't you? This weekend, though, we start to learn the lesson of what we're supposed to do with that spiritual high. How are you and I called to respond to what has been swirling around over these last 4 months? The answer starts to take shape with the reading from Paul to the Romans. These past 4 months are meant to impress on you and I just how much God loves you. Paul points out that it's logical to trust God with our lives totally, unconditionally, no matter what. No matter what difficulties, sufferings, sadness, or confusion that we experience, God has our back. And how do we know this? By the enormity of what Jesus did for us. Paul uses an argument that's simple, but it's profound. For someone like Jesus to sacrifice and totally give himself for a just and a righteous person is difficult. But I'm going to paraphrase Paul here. But he goes on to say, for you and for me, a bunch of sinners, a bunch of stiff-necked people with all of our faults and our failures and our idiosyncrasies, it seems impossible, but he did it. Jesus did it anyway. And we each have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for me? How am I going to respond to the depth of that fullness of love poured out for me? The total purpose of our reading from the Romans is to make you and me pose that question. How will I respond to this outpouring of love from Jesus, from God himself? Knowing and believing this, letting this message really sink in and grab my heart and my soul. Who do I want to be? What am I supposed to do now? And my friends, Matthew comes to the rescue. He shows us how to answer that question. We're supposed to see ourselves in 3 different places, I think, in this gospel. We are all sheep who need a shepherd. Jesus. We have just been shepherded, haven't we, over the last 4 months through the very heart and soul of our faith with the help of Jesus. His help in leading us has prepared us, and each and every one of you is ready. Next, we're to see ourselves as shepherds or laborers. You heard me, not like shepherding of the Pope or our bishops and priests. Let's consider them professional shepherds. But you and I are called to be universal shepherds. And the details of this call depends on our age and our responsibilities in our daily life. You and I are baptized into being laborers who preach the gospel. Maybe not so much by words, but by our deeds. Our faith, the good news, has been shepherded by words, but many, many more times and more widespread and more powerful by deeds, deeds of love. You know, words can be debated and argued all day long, but it's hard to argue with somebody's deeds and the way they present their lives. Remember the adage, actions speak louder than words? This is the kind of shepherds we're supposed to be. The kind of laborer that you and I are called to be is the way Jesus led, by allowing his deeds to speak for him as much as his words, didn't he? What greater deed is there than to die and to sacrifice himself for us, for sluggish and foolish sheep? Then after saving us, what does he do? He appoints us to carry on that mission for him as parts of his body in the world today. When we don't feel worthy of this call, we need to remind ourselves of St. Paul's message. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't wait for you and I to be perfected. He made his claim on us when we were sinners. His sacrifice for you and I came right where we are in our lives, with all of its warts and all of its idiosyncrasies. And then he saves us and commissions us to go out and proclaim in word and in deed, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now I can see some of you saying, Deacon, what does that really look like? I can't drive out demons. I don't cure people. Well, maybe we should stop looking at the letter of the commission and look at the spirit of that commission. That's true about driving out demons, but we can heal and we can cure the disease of loneliness by being a friend to someone. We can heal the sicknesses of hatred and bigotry by not participating in those activities. And we can show authority over unclean spirits by speaking out against things we see in the world around us. The transgender ideology that we see around us today. These are just a few examples of the unclean spirits that are there. Pick one and be counted against the poison that it spreads in our society. The third place that we can see ourselves in Matthew's gospel is in that list at the end. The names of the 12 apostles are these. You know, if Matthew were writing this ending for us today, he wouldn't stop with the number 12. And I wish we had the time to do this one name at a time, but we really don't. So to really imprint this on our hearts, I want to try something. I'm going to proclaim the last part of that gospel again. And when I get to the list, I'm going to stop and pause for just a minute. And I want one of you to look up at me for just a minute and quietly but out loud say your first name. Put yourself in the list. And then I'll finish the reading. Are you ready? The names of the apostles are these. David. As you go, make this proclamation. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Without cost you have received, and without cost you are to give.